Hey, Deserving listeners, this is part 2 in my evaluation of iDubbbz apology video. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's watch.
Saying like, oh, okay, it's probably not that important that this video stays online because truthfully, I've seen it, I've experienced the content, but it's done a lot of damage. We can just let it go. I'm sorry to everyone that I made content cop videos on. I still don't like the majority of you, and that's fine, but I can recognize that you did not deserve the hate and harassment that I sent your way. I particularly want to apologize to Tana. Tana, I'm sorry. I should have never made that video. I harassed Tana in person and then harassed her online, and that...
Interesting. So it's not just on YouTube. He is saying that he harassed her in person. Yikes.
Deplorable behavior. It's so stupid. I'm also sorry to all the black viewers and minority groups who had to put up with that video and put up with, you know, the phrases. I said either it's all okay or none of it's okay. And that's just so dangerous and stupid. I have made content that I'm proud of.
Yeah, I do know enough about him to know that he was one of those edgelords that would use the N-word and other kinds of racial slurs and would talk a lot about that. And yeah, the whole discourse among some white people, usually white men, who just really want to say the N-word. And I think that says a lot about you. Why are you so focused on that?
Over the years, it hasn't been as consistent as maybe I'd like it to have been, but you know, there is a lot of content that I think had a net positive on the world, and you know, I'm going to strive to continue on that trend. But again, I'm absolutely going to continue to make mistakes, but I want the mistakes to be a lot smaller and a lot less serious. I also want to give some clarity to the post-fight speech that I gave. I mean, it wasn't a speech. It was a phrase. I was like,
you know, I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but I really do appreciate the support, and you know, thank you for coming.
That was addressing the people over the years that I neglected and I left behind. You know, the people whose feelings I, you know, didn't take into consideration. Those are the people who I was addressing as, I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea. Anyone who thinks that I should be shouting the N-word from the rooftops, I don't want to be your cup of tea. Now I want to talk about...
Okay, interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of detail there that I'm not aware of, but that does lend itself to more credibility. That after the creator, what do they call it? Creator bash or something? It was creators boxing, right? People asked me if I would participate. I'm like, God, no. There's just no. There's so many reasons why. No. I would love to go though. Some of my favorite creators were in, like Michael Reeves. Anyway, it sounds like he was crying in that moment. Yeah, I could really see that because that was recently. That was like a year ago, right? And the boxing situation. And he was probably already thinking he wanted to change. And then because he was in charge, I believe, of that whole event, the boxing thing. And there was an overwhelming turnout. It was, everybody on YouTube was talking about it for that couple weeks. And so there was, I'm guessing for him, a shift in how he thought, or at least a continuation of the shift in how he thought about his place in the internet world, in the YouTube world. Because it was, even though it was a set of boxing matches, it had a lot of feel-good moments to it, right? A lot of humanity in it. I can imagine that really being emotional for him and thinking, I want it to be like this. This is what I want to do. This is where I am now. I'm more secure now, and I want my content, I want my life to be more in this zone, and I don't want it to be like the way it was before.
About events and situations that have happened over the past 5 years of my life that have led me to the place I'm at now. One year I was at a convention and a bunch of fans were, you know, wanting pictures, and this particular fan came up to me and said, I know you probably don't like transgender people, but can I, you know, get a picture? that smacked me in the face. I was like, oh, holy shit. Why would you think that? But I mean, it was fairly obvious. I was being cruel, hateful, bigoted, and being very uncaring about people's feelings.
Okay, good. So getting back to our list here, he is expressing a number of elements here. So one, he's acknowledging the transgression. That's number one. I created content that put it out there that being trans is wrong or bad or something. Even though I didn't necessarily say that specifically, I was putting out a lot of rhetoric that was in that category. Number two, acknowledging the harm. He's saying that he harmed this individual. And yeah, how heartbreaking that must have been for him, for a fan to, I mean, it makes me want to cry that someone would come up to him to take a picture, that they're a fan, and that they would say, I know you probably don't support my identity, who I am as a human being, but can I have a picture anyway? I mean, oh, it just breaks your heart, right? And what a wonderful person that did that approached him in this way and gave him a chance to feel that understanding, right? That's what I was saying earlier of like, when you really understand the impact that you have on someone else, when you listen, then you change your ways, right? Number three, take responsibility. It's four, expressing remorse. So he is, I think in this moment, he is talking about how in that moment he felt bad. He felt this trans individual's pain, and he was the cause of that pain. Number five is explain the cause without making excuses, which he's doing a little bit of. Number six is provide a plan to address the cause in the future, which he has done a little bit of that. I would imagine that he could talk more about his journey regarding racism and his journey regarding privilege and his journey regarding empathy and really understanding other people's experience. I'm guessing he's already done a lot of that, but he could speak more to that and model it for others. And then I have five more elements of effective apology. Well, let's get into it. So number seven is is offer remedy. And so yeah, he is saying he's going to address that. He's going to change his content in the future. Perhaps that will have elements of anti-bigotry, this sort of thing. He's going to take down those videos. He's going to give money to charity. So he is offering remedy. Number eight, requesting confirmation of accuracy. So it's hard to know when you're a public figure, because this normally applies to people in my therapy office who are apologizing to each other. So typically you would apologize and then ask the person, so did I miss anything? Is there anything that you want me to clarify? Because often the first pass at an apology doesn't hit everything. Sometimes you could be completely off base. Number nine is requesting forgiveness. Again, it's hard to know who exactly. Well, he is apologizing to one person individual, so he could ask for forgiveness. You can't force someone to forgive you. Number 10 is follow through with the remedy and the plan. So proof's in the pudding as to whether or not he'll follow through. And then 11, I have find meaning, which is a catch-all on the reflection that you do post-apology, where you might do this continually, and he might do it continually, of just like, who am I? Why am I on this planet? What kind of content do I want to make? How do I make up for it? Just a bird's eye view of who he is and what he's done and where he's going. When not all apologies require this, because sometimes you just bump into someone with your cart at the grocery store and you don't have to contemplate the meaning of that for the rest of your life. But for things like this, you would imagine that you would benefit from that.
Probably wouldn't make it these days. I'm very grateful to those guys and how they broached the subject, because, you know, it didn't put me on the defensive. It just made me realize, like, I'm stupid. I'm stupid, and I really need to, like, acknowledge these things. Like what am I doing? I'm still trying to make excuses for myself and, like, you know, why I made that video. It's like,
This is also good. He's talking about his process, his thinking, his defenses, the inner dialogue, the conflict internally for him as he goes down this road, which also helps with his credibility. When I apologize, I do things like this as well. I'll say, yeah, you know, at first I thought, I don't need to apologize, I'm right. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, oh boy, you know, I'm usually wrong when I think I'm right. So I'm not perfect. I can be pretty dumb. I can be pretty reactive at times, and it doesn't excuse it, but it's hard to admit to myself. And so I'm sorry for what I did. It shows that you're mulling it over, that you're having a normal process, that you are taking the time to think about it, that it was hard for you. Apologies usually are hard for us. And a part of communicating your remorse and a part of coming across as credible is to demonstrate that it was hard to apologize. Because if it's super easy to apologize, then if it's a significant transgression, then in all likelihood, you're not really apologizing, right? Because to truly apologize for a major transgression is to truly understand the harm that you committed, to understand how other people were hurt by you, that you made choices that led to the harm of others. That shouldn't be easy to reckon with. And so to demonstrate that it was a struggle to get there demonstrates that you understand the weight of what you did.
In closing, I want to say that I have always thought that I was an empathetic person because I thought, well, I get angry, I get sad, of course I got empathy. Seems easy, right? Empathy. I definitely have that. There were moments where like a dog would die in a film and I'd cry. So it's like, of course I have empathy. But I never did. I think only in these past couple of years have I gained the ability, empathy, and I'm very ashamed to admit that.
Yeah, this is a huge topic in my field. What do we mean by empathy? How does it develop? What are the elements of empathy? Are we talking about sympathy? Are we talking about really understanding what other people are feeling? Can we ever really do that? Are we talking about remorse and not wanting to harm other people? Are we talking about psychopathy and antisocial personality? There's a lot I can get into. But I think what he's talking about is that he would be attacked by people, and maybe the question would just emerge for him of like, do I have empathy? And for people who make this kind of content in the past, when he would attack people, it is a question, because when you're attacking people, when you're encouraging your fans, or at least creating content that you know is going to motivate fans to actually attack an individual and ruin their life, you must not have empathy, right? And personality disorders are a specialty of mine, psychopathy and antisocial being a part of that. It's very complicated. The internet seems to think they can diagnose people with these things pretty easily when, in my opinion, the internet and even some clinicians don't really understand it fully. It's complicated. Anyway, so what I think he's talking about is he would be attacked for not having empathy, and then he would check in with himself and he'd say, no, I have empathy, I have emotion. People without empathy still have emotion. There's this notion that somehow psychopaths, sociopaths, antisocial individuals, they have no emotion. It's depicted in movies like Dexter, this kind of thing, and it's just not the case. People who lack empathy, personality-wise, absolutely have emotion. They have all the regular emotions. They're not emotionally stunted. They can be a little emotionally stunted, but it really depends. The other thing I'll say is that as people age, their brain develops and their moral understanding develops, their understanding of other people's experience develops, their sense of responsibility for other people develops, and their empathy develops. Everyone is developing at a different rate in different ways. There are some trends around gender and socialization that I could go into that I won't hear for time's sake, but I'm guessing for him, he not only was still developing that way when he was younger, but also it seems like he was cutting himself off from really understanding what other people were going through. He was probably in a bubble of sorts that protected themselves. They built an ideology that said, we can say these words, and when they are hurt by us or when they're upset, that's their problem. This is a free country. This is a free internet. And they have all these premises that they stand on that justify what they're doing. And so do these individuals lack empathy innately as a personality trait? Not usually. And that's actually a pretty dangerous way of thinking. And he's kind of speaking to this, that it's not a matter of not having empathy or having empathy, or the ability to have empathy and the ability not to. It's about listening to other people and believing them when they tell you that what you're doing is hurtful to them. That's what empathy involves. You can take someone that has an innate ability to be empathetic, but you indoctrinate them and they have habits that defend against listening to other people, and they don't take the time to listen to other people, and that person will exhibit lack of empathy, lack of remorse. They will act in a psychopathic way, even though they don't have psychopathic personality. And I think that's what he's talking about.
It sounds really pathetic to say at the age of 32 I've acquired empathy, but I have, and I've realized it because I just can't help myself but feel for other people's pain and suffering now.
Yeah, good for him. And this is also helpful for the audience and perhaps to those who he transgressed upon. He's saying that before I just didn't have empathy, or I didn't exhibit empathy, and now that I do, I feel bad for what I've done. And yeah, research demonstrates that people do develop in this way on average, not everyone. And I can certainly attest to it myself as well, especially if I go back to when I was in middle school and I read my journal from then. I didn't exhibit as much empathy and understanding that I do today. There's a lot of different factors. There's the development of your brain, prefrontal cortex, this kind of thing. Also, the acquisition of stories from other people and listening to other people. Also, the acquisition of experiences yourself. If you've never been harmed in a certain way, a classic example that I experience frequently is that before, when I was younger and I'd be driving around and I'd see a pedestrian, I wouldn't be unsafe around them, but I wouldn't really take the time to make them feel comfortable. Later on in life, I became more of a walker, a dog walker, or just a city walker. And I learned that there are basically two kinds of drivers. There are drivers that understand the pedestrian plight, and there are drivers that don't. And although the drivers that don't understand, they're not necessarily breaking any laws, but they're not being courteous. When I'm walking across the street in downtown Seattle and you have a car that is at a red light and they want to go through and they're sort of edging into the crosswalk as I'm crossing, it's terrifying. There's this giant, 2-ton truck that is edging towards you, and they could kill you at any moment. And the guy in the truck is just like, well, I'm not going to run the guy over, but how do I know that? And so you just want to be empathetic. Now, does the truck driver have no empathy? I don't know. The truck driver probably does have empathy, but the difference is that when you actually are a pedestrian, you start to have those feelings, and thus when you get behind the wheel, you consider those feelings when you're driving around. And when I was younger, I didn't do a lot of walking, and so I probably wasn't very nice to other pedestrians. Now I am. Like in my neighborhood, when someone's walking along the road, because we don't have a lot of sidewalks in my neighborhood, I will go all the way to the other lane and go slowly around them, even though I don't even know if they need me to do that. But I do it because I know what it's like when someone just zips by you on the road. Even though I know I'm not going to run them over, I just don't. I care about their feelings. Another example of this is when I was younger and I'd be walking through town or something, and I would be walking behind a woman, and she would be alone, and I'd just be, say it's at night or something, and let's say I'm 20 feet behind her, and I wouldn't even think about it. I'd just be like, okay, people walking on the sidewalk. Now that I've heard more women talk about what it's like to walk alone in the city and to have a man walking behind them or near them or something, and in their head, they're not thinking, well, that guy is going to rape me, that guy is going to kill me, but they're like, but he might. There's a 1% chance or something that he might actually attack me, and so I have commensurate fear around that. So in the past, I would have said something like, and maybe even I did when I was 22, I would have said, well, that's on her. I'm not going to harm her. There's no evidence that I'm going to harm her. Why is she afraid of me? Okay, but if you extend yourself into the life of what it's like to be a woman, and of course, when you have the privilege of a man, you have no idea because you haven't been in that situation. You have the privilege of not having to experience that sort of terror. And so I didn't, do anything to account for that. Later on, when I started to listen more and more, and it took a while for me to actually really understand what the experience was like for women. Not all women, right? So I'm walking behind a stranger on the sidewalk now. I don't know what she's going through. I can't tell. And certainly I'm not going to harm her. But what if she worries about that? So what I do is I cross the street or I hang back a little bit. Sometimes I'll even, if I'm close enough, I'll get in front of them. So then I'm the one that's exposed, my back is exposed to them. It's like, okay, I get in front of them, and then they don't worry that I'm behind them. So is that insulting to me? Is that saying that I'm a criminal? No, I'm just being in someone else's shoes because I've heard those stories. So it sounds like he's heard more and more stories, like the trans individual that he talked to, the fan that came up to him, and so they wanted to take a picture with him, that he heard very briefly someone else's experience and thought, oh, And so that informs his behavior moving forward. So that's another element in the development of empathy, is listening. It's so important to listen. As a therapist, that's my job. 99% of a session with me as a therapist, I don't say anything. That might be hard to imagine since I'm always yammering, but I'm quite quiet and I'm intensely listening and nodding my head. And when you do that, you absorb a lot of different types of experience, and you catalog the experience of people that are in different subgroups than you're in, and you start to say, "Whoa, that's what it's like for them, huh? I never knew that. Didn't have any idea. Maybe I should take that into account." And then you have empathy, because the foundation of empathy is mentalization, meaning that you can actually mentalize their mind. You can actually step into, based on what you're observing, what they're experiencing. It's actually one of the things as human beings we're actually particularly good at. When we are able to do that, then we can actually have empathy. If you don't do that, then you can't. And just having a general ability to mentalize isn't enough. You actually have to hear stories from people and understand what they're going through. Another element of the development of empathy is that we are taught in our society that emotions are bad and weak, particularly boys and men are taught this. And so boys and men in particular, but really everyone, will try to suppress and at the very least shame themselves for having any kind of weak emotion. And so when we are given an opportunity to have empathy, we are denied it because we're generally cut off from our emotions in general. Part of empathy is intuiting what someone else, or imagining what someone else is going through, and then because of our ability to mentalize and our mirror neurons and stuff, we actually will feel someone else's feeling. When you're watching a television show or a movie and there's a really cringeworthy moment, like the character is doing something that is problematic and you're cringing on it, you'll feel it in your body. Well, that's because we have the ability to extend ourselves into other people's lives. When we're watching a TV show or a movie, we're not actually going through something that's causing a cringe, but we're imagining they are. And so we go, "Oh, I can't watch this because that person is about to do that." And so we have that ability. And when you cut yourself off from your body and you don't acknowledge emotions, then you might not even know that you're having an emotion. You don't register. And so it also will interfere with your empathy. And so typically as people grow and mature and become less insecure and more safe to feel their feelings, more secure in their manhood, or more secure in their humanness or something, then they're freer to feel those feelings and thus have a greater ability to empathize.
Still not perfect. I think that is, my empathy meter's only maybe like a quarter of the way filled up potentially, but it's at least there. And I just want you guys to know that you can unlock ability empathy if you experience more life. It might take you getting hurt a little bit, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it's good. He's referring to one of the elements that I was saying earlier, that when you get hurt, then you know what it's like to go through that, and then you feel for other people.
It is so worth it. So thank you for watching, everyone. I do want to create more regular content, and I don't want to just have the next 5 videos be apologies. So I have uploaded a squirrel video on my second channel if you want to watch that. I guess as one final thing, I just want to thank everyone who's given me the space and the compassion to grow as a person, because it's taken longer than it probably should have. I appreciate everyone, and I think most importantly, I appreciate my wife, Anissa. She has been insanely compassionate and helpful.
Yeah, and I think that this is a good thing and a good model for others, that a lot of people have committed transgressions of various sorts, including racist transgressions in the past. And we as a society, for those of us in the know and those of us on the good side of history, are trying to eliminate and reduce racism in our society. We are activists, we are marching, we are speaking up. So when someone who was committing racist transgressions in the past realizes what they've done, how do they change? How do they demonstrate that they've changed? How do they make up for it? And I think as far as an apology video goes, this is good. Okay, so let's look at my grading scale. And let's start at B, sufficient. So sufficiently met the first 7 components of effective apologies. I would say that iDubbbz did do that. So let's see if we can give him an A. More than sufficient. Went beyond the necessary apology to sincerely demonstrate remorse. Yeah, I think he could have done better there. I think he could have really poured it on a little thicker regarding how he made other people feel and how that made him feel, knowing he made them feel that way. He did a little bit of that, and that's what B means, is that he sufficiently did it. Sufficiently described their own personality issues that led to the transgression. A little bit of that, but not a lot. Sufficiently laid out a plan to address the factors that led to the transgression. A little bit, but not a lot. So I would give him a solid B, B+. And these elements could be there, but he just didn't mention them in the video, or he's not really there yet. Another thing to think about is that apologies are often an iterative, ongoing process, particularly for major transgressions. If, for example, you cheat on your partner and you're very sorry about it, whether you stay together or not afterwards, and at first you're very apologetic and you're remorseful, you're sorry, and you apologize, but you don't really know why you cheated, and you only know some of the harm that you've committed to the other person. So it might take you a while to fully understand not only the harm you committed and also what led you to it. And so over time, over years of therapy or exploration, you might actually learn more and then add on to the apology later, and maybe he'll do that too. So I don't want to say that his apology was bad. I would say, it's sufficient. It's good. It's a good apology, which honestly is not typical. I have down here, the average public apology is a D.
And I watched his apology video, and it was just brutal to watch. So brutal. He is completely wrong in his own self-assessment of his past behavior. Him apologizing for edgy jokes, for, and you adopting all this weirdo leftist language, like making jokes about somebody on the internet is literal harassment. He mentions that several times. And
okay, so this channel is called The Quartering. It has 1.5 million subscribers, and he is reacting to iDubbbz apology video. And as I predicted, there are people who are saying that he's wrong for apologizing. How is he wrong? If he feels bad for hurting other people, he's allowed to apologize for that. I'm pretty sure he acknowledged that he was directly responsible for hurting other people and making other people feel lesser or something. And so this individual is saying that he's wrong because he's woke and whatever. Yeah, I think I'm going to watch someone else.
When he was making this kind of content, he was like 28 years old, okay? So my age now, he was not some young teenager. This is a guy that had edgy humor nearly up to his 30s, okay? So now that he's 32, he has discovered empath, okay? He's become an empathetic person. He's got some empathy now, all right? Care for the human people around him.
Okay, so this YouTuber is Some Ordinary Gamer, I think is what he's called, and he is criticizing iDubbbz apology. And yeah, it is a good point that you were making these videos when you were 28. If that's true, then yeah. But I don't know. I think we equate 20s with being an adult. But I can tell you from research and my own experience, and iDubbbz as an example, that we continue to move into what we might consider maturity and adulthood throughout our life, or we have an opportunity to do so. And, some people develop slower. I think also iDubbbz might say that he was trying to keep up with the content machine that he had created and was trying to appease his fans. And so he maybe drifted a little longer within the adolescent, early 20s mindset, right? That might have been his audience. I don't know. So there's that. Also, I would just say for myself that as I have gained more experiences myself and also hearing from other people, that my empathy continues to develop. And I'm guessing in another 10 years, my empathy will be even broader and deeper. So the change that you can have from 28 to 32 can absolutely be profound for some individuals.
Now, I'm not here to gatekeep progress. I think everyone grows at a different rate. I just think it's kind of cringy that now you've discovered it. Now, obviously, there's a bit of criticism as to you've magically discovered empathy now that, the YouTube.
Yeah, this is another criticism that I just don't understand. If you don't believe iDubbbz, if you think he's being insincere and he's just doing it because he's worried about his career or something, then okay, absolutely, that's possible. And I have no idea. I don't think any of us do. But if you believe that it's possible that he is being sincere, then I just don't understand this criticism of like, oh, now all of a sudden you're apologizing. At what point would an apology happen where people wouldn't incur that kind of criticism? Obviously, you shouldn't commit the transgression to begin with. And if you did commit the transgression, it'd be better if you apologized directly after. But things take time, and it doesn't mean that it erases the transgression or says that we're all good now. When we are asking for change in our society, a part of our effort to change society involves helping people to change, to apologize for what they've done in the past, to transform, to understand. And in order for that to happen, we have to be receptive to people changing and to apologizing. We have to show the world that people can come forward and they're not going to be attacked, which can happen a lot of times. People will emerge out of bigotry and they will apologize, and the bigots, their fans, will hate them because the leader of the bigots is now leaving them, abandoning them. But then the harmed individuals will also reject them because they're saying this is too little too late. And maybe it is. But I just think if we're going to move forward in society, in my opinion, on average, we need to actually reward these individuals. We don't say you're off the hook. We don't say the slate is clean, but we say that's good. This is a step in the right direction. I'm encouraged to see where you're going to head with this in the future.
Now, in America, at least, a lot of white people who are privileged grow up in these bastions of whiteness where they are the majority. They often live in these areas that are historically white on purpose, right? And so when they come to the internet and they share a lot of what's funny in their town or what is funny to them in this moment, a lot of it often is racist shit that doesn't actually fly outside of those situations.
Yeah, I agree with everything that she's saying. So this channel's called Cat Black, and she has almost 500,000 subscribers. There's really nothing to add to what she's saying.
And often when I look at people like iDubbbz, the impression and vibe that I get from their content is these are kids who are very privileged, who haven't really had to deal with actively engaging with marginalized folks, specifically marginalized folks who are people of color. And so there are certain things that they find really funny and really edgy and really interesting that honestly don't really float outside of it.
Yeah, I think that's a charitable view of the individuals that follow these kinds of content providers or politicians, that they just haven't interacted outside of their bubble. And to them, using the N-word or something, it's like, oh my God, that's so, yeah, the way that children, and a lot of them probably are children, literally minors who were watching his YouTube channel. When you're a kid, I think of that Monty Python skit where these two kids are saying, it's the Monty Python adults playing children, and they're being interviewed on television, and one of the kids keeps saying bottom and laughing about it because to them it's funny to press the envelope of what is acceptable. And so you'll have these bubbles of whiteness that she is referring to, in which people will use the N-word because they're pushing the same envelope. It's just like that kid in Monty Python saying bottom. It's just a white kid saying the N-word. And to their group of people, they know that it's not okay, hopefully, maybe not always. And to them, it doesn't have any harm because they're not harmed by that, and the people around them aren't harmed by that, and they haven't learned enough to know that other people are harmed by that, and they haven't developed morally or emotionally sufficiently enough to understand how that might hurt other people. And so they participate in those kinds of jokes, which she's referring to.
And there's a couple of videos I've watched where people are basically saying that this is him destroying his career, right? There's a lot of people who are calling him too sensitive. They're saying that he's being like cucked and shit because of this stuff. And honestly, if I'm being real, as somebody who watched a lot of apology videos on YouTube, especially Tana Moja's apology videos, this did seem very genuine.
Okay, So I'm guessing that Kat Black might be one of those individuals that was transgressed upon. I don't know if she considers herself to be one of those individuals, but from her, she's saying that it's seemingly sincere. I don't know if she accepts the apology or she feels that it's sufficient. Let's see what she says.
This really did seem very genuine. Now, am I going to seek out iDubbbz content? Probably not. But if I see him at a convention, I won't have the feeling that I had before where I just dismissed him as somebody who was probably a racist, right? And the thing about that is, you guys got to understand, I know that for a lot of white people that seems like a really harsh thing for me to do, right? Just dismiss somebody without knowing much about them, but it's protecting myself. And I think that somebody who has empathy for other people, especially has empathy for marginalized folks, would understand that's what that is. And
Yeah, I wouldn't fault anyone, Kat Black or myself or anyone out there, for dismissing someone as a racist because they have demonstrated that they are okay proliferating racist rhetoric. I mean, I'm not saying you're supposed to harm them. Two wrongs don't make a right. But if I saw, I don't know, I don't want to name anyone, but if I saw certain individuals from YouTube at a convention or something, yeah, I would quote unquote dismiss them, meaning that I'd be like, oh, there's that asshole over there. I mean, I'm okay with that. I think that when bigots are bigots, they deserve to have reactions against them. I'm not saying I'm supposed to go over there and push them down the stairs or even necessarily say anything about them publicly. I don't know. Depends, but I wouldn't fault anyone for that. But anyway, so it sounds like for Kat Black, and you can watch her whole video. It's over an hour long, in which she watches his apology video and comments on it. It's a pretty good video. I recommend watching it. All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.